We were married older. I was 33, he was 34, so we knew enough to know that it might not happen easily to start a family. So we were just surprised and overjoyed that I was pregnant very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you got a disturbing diagnosis about your baby.
Yeah, so at the 20-week ultrasound when, you know, I thought things could happen, but it won't happen to us. We were just gonna go in. My biggest concern was, is she gonna tell us the sex of the baby? We didn't wanna find out.
Okay.
Would she slip and tell us?
Yeah.
And so we went in and she gets very silent, our sonographer, and she leaves the room for what felt like an eternity and comes back, and our doctor sits down with us and she says, it's not good. We can't seem to find the skull of your baby. And so I'm gonna send you to a high-risk doctor. We quickly go there and find out that our baby has what's called Anencephaly, and she would not live once born. So she could live in my womb. We found out it was a little girl. She could live in my womb, but not outside. In that moment, and the drive to the high-risk doctor, it just felt like all of my categories had just been broken in how I imagined our family to form and what God was going to ask us to walk through. And I just didn't know how can we endure this? Now I'm carrying a child that won't live, but actually can live inside my womb. And how are we going to face the next 20-some weeks, celebrating her life, but also anticipating her death?
Yeah. So Lindsey, I'm going to ask the question because I think there are some people at home that might be wondering, why choose to carry a child that you knew was not going to live outside the womb?
Yeah. You know, I looked on that screen and I had grown to love her in my womb. And she was ours and she was entrusted to us for a season. I thought and hoped that it would be a lifetime. And in God's infinite wisdom, he was entrusting her to us for a shorter amount of time. And I just knew I wanted to be a good steward of her life. And I wanted to care for her and love her and value her life for every moment that God would give her life, that it wasn't ours to take, and that I would let God write her story and trust him when everything ahead of me seemed like sorrow and pain, that he could infuse hope and joy in unexpected ways. And so I was holding on to that, even though I didn't feel like that in the moment, trusting that he was going to do something that I couldn't see, because all I saw was darkness and sadness. And slowly, God did begin to infuse his hope and his joy.
There was prayer for healing, hoping that God would heal your little girl. You found out it's a little girl in the womb. Tell me about that cry out to God, saying, just God, would you heal our little baby?
Yeah, you know, I never had experienced a situation where my need to see him as the healer was so pronounced and profound, and I never had to wrestle with what does it mean that God is our healer. And so that was a big piece for me of, God, do I trust that you can heal? And will I pray for that? But also, do I trust that your healing can come in ways that I can't see? That if it's not a physical healing, that the miracle that you may do might be something very different and just as powerful and just as glorifying to you. And so I wrestled with that, and I hoped, beyond hope, that he would heal her. And he chose not to.
You decided that you would name this baby. Tell me what her name
Yeah, her name is Sophia Kyla Dennis, and her name is Sophia, comes from the Greek word that means wisdom. And we really felt from the beginning that, you know, in the eyes of the world, she was small, she was weak, she was, for, you know, many people would not choose to carry her. And we just thought, you know, there's a passage in the Bible that says God chose the weak things of the world to shame the wise. And that God in his infinite wisdom, his wisdom was different than man's wisdom. And that her life, our prayer was that her life would reflect the wisdom of God and not the wisdom of man. And
So Sophia was born on September 1st, 2013. And what I love about your story, Lindsey, is you were surrounded by community from beginning to end. Sophia only lived for 10 hours.
Yeah.
And what were those 10 hours like?
You know, those 10 hours were filled with tears, but there was actually so much celebration in that hospital room. We had packed the hospital room. The nurses and the doctors were behind us, were celebrating with us. We had a friend bring in a birthday cake so we could sing happy birthday to her. There was more people in the hospital room than probably were even allowed. And we cherished those moments with her. We didn't know that she would live beyond a few minutes. So we were told that potentially she could not be born alive or just live a few minutes. So the fact that we were beginning to get hours was a surprise and a gift to us. And it enabled us to really celebrate those moments with her and just enjoy those hours that we got to parent her. Not enough hours by any stretch, but they were sweet moments. And I think God was so gracious to us to give us such joy in the midst of knowing that we were going to say goodbye to her so soon.
A couple months later, you find out, after you've lost Sophie, you find out that you're pregnant again.
There was this hope that we would get to bring this baby home, but there was also this knowing that there were no guarantees. And so we were anxious for when we would go into the doctor and find out, does this baby have a similar condition, something different? We had no reason to believe that this could happen twice. Our doctors had gone through lots of medical risks, and there was no reason to believe that we would walk through this again.
So you go visit your high-risk doctor 12 weeks in.
Yeah.
And you find out some heartbreaking news.
Yeah, so our doctor comes in. Again, our sonographer is gone for a long time. She has printed off a photo. We're trying to look, can we see the brain and skull? It looks different. Our doctor comes in and says that it is not anencephaly, it's what's called a crania, and our child's brain had formed, but their skull had not, and it would play out the same way. And in that space where we sense God's peace in a lot of profound ways on our journey with Sophie, it felt as if God was absent. I wondered, how could you, one, allow us to walk through this one time, but much less the same thing twice? I knew now what it was like to lose a child, so now looking ahead, I'm going to have to do this again. And I did not know how he would sustain us the second time.
What, is there anger?
Yes.
And what is the conversation with God like in that anger?
You know, with the loss of our first daughter, I did not really question God's goodness. I hadn't been brought to that point. I knew he was good, I trusted his goodness. But when we walked through this with Dasa, I think it just ripped at the categories of how I thought he worked. I thought you worked one way, God. I thought that, I knew that sorrow and suffering they're a part of life, and we would walk through that. But I just didn't, in my Western mentality, think that we would walk through loss twice or so quickly together. And so I was angry, and I wondered, how do you work all these things that I thought about who you were? Are you good, God? What does it mean that you're good? What does it mean in Romans where Paul talks about this hope that doesn't disappoint? Because I'm so disappointed. What is that hope? And how do I know it on this journey where it feels so dark and I want so badly to turn my back? But I know that you hold life in your hands and you hold the answer for life, so I want to really know who you are in this pain. But I was very confused and very angry.
I think the pivotal word that you used in that sentence is but. Like, you didn't just say, I then turned my back on God, because you know what, there are many people watching, and myself would be like, yeah, I don't blame you. But you use the word but, like you still want to find that hope in Jesus. Why? Why cling to something that you just don't understand?
You know, I think that is what he calls his people to throughout history, is to trust and believe him, even when our circumstances don't make sense. I think we so easily look at him through the lens of our circumstances. And they are so finite and so small in comparison to this vast and holy God. And I knew enough to know, God, you are bigger than what I can see. And I don't like what you're doing right now. I'm not even sure I like you. But I know that you are good in this somewhere. And I want to seek that and find it. And I don't want to turn my back on you, because I know if I turn my back, I will not know you. If I stay towards you, if my posture, even if all of the things I bring to the table are pain and lament and sorrow, I know that you will meet me in that somehow, some way, sometime. And so I just asked him to help me stay with the posture towards him.
So you named your second little girl. What did you name her?
Her name is Dasa, and it's a shortened version of the Hebrew word Hadassah, which comes from the word Esther, with the name Esther in the Bible.
On November 13th, 2014, Dasa was born. Tell me about that experience that day.
You know, that day was filled with great anticipation and wonder of would she be born alive, but also anxiousness, because now we knew what it was like to walk through this part of our story. And I wanted to fill all of these moments I didn't get to have with Sophie in such a small amount of space with Dasa. And you can't fit a lifetime of memories, and Dasa lived 12 hours. And so there was a lot of grief in that space. There was still so much joy in seeing her personality come alive and holding her. She lived for 12 hours and allowing her to meet our family and our friends. But there was great sorrow at knowing and then having to say goodbye once again to my second daughter.
Yeah. Did you ever think, Lindsey, why me?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'd look around and see friends who had healthy babies.
You're in a hospital room where there are probably many women giving birth to children that are going to survive and live a long life.
Yeah, I question that a lot, and I wonder why this is the story God chose for us. And I still wonder that. Yeah. And I long for these precious little girls to be in my arms today. Yeah. And yet I see that, again, there is a bigger story that God is writing, and I miss them so much. And I would choose a different story if I was the one in charge of my story. But if I chose a different story, I wouldn't have the story God gave me with my girls. So there would be loss in that too. And it's a strange way to think of it. But their life has drawn me closer to Jesus. Their life has radiated the value of life. Their life has been gifts to us, even the shortness of them. And so I don't know if I'll have that question come heaven, but I look forward to the day when it all makes sense. It doesn't all make sense to me now, and I've had to learn to live in the ambiguity of that there are things that just don't make sense. And one day God will make sense of it all.
There is also joy in this story. God chose you to be Jaden's mom. You adopted a little boy, you and Kevin, as well as you were able to have a biological child. Briella is her name. What is life like today, being the mom of 4?
Yes. So I have at home now, I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and life is full. And they know the names of their big sisters, and they talk about them, and I pray that God would use them to their sisters to shape their hearts for him. But the days are full and long. And but our living children bring us so much joy. And I'm so grateful for the gift of their life and how God has formed our family. It's not the way I thought it would be. But he has been in every detail of our family story, the ones that I see, the ones I can't see, and the ones to come.